The sun had no mercy. It hung high and unbothered in the sky, pouring heat over the cracked roads and tired rooftops of Ibadan's outskirts. The breeze, when it came at all, brought only the scent of dust, diesel, and faint charcoal smoke, the kind that clung to skin and clothes long after you'd gone home. But Zara had no home to go to. Not anymore. She sat by the roadside, crouched low on a stool that once had 4 legs, now propped by a stone on one side. Her hands moved with rhythm, deliberate, practiced, turning golden ears of corn over the grill. Each one hissed as it met the flame, the dry kernels blistering and blackening in the heat. Her fingers were immune to the warmth by now. They had no room for softness. Behind her, a sack of raw corn lay open. In front of her, a plastic bowl held the meager earnings of the day, a handful of crumpled naira notes, mostly 100 Nigerian nairas and 200 Nigerian nairas, none clean. Zara wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist, her other hand resting on her round belly. 8 months. Maybe more. She had stopped counting. The baby's kicks were getting stronger, like tiny fists thumping against the walls of her womb. Sometimes they came with such force that she flinched, biting back a groan. But there was no one to hear her pain anyway. The last time she'd seen a hospital was 5 months ago. She shifted on the stool, trying to ease the pressure in her lower back. It had been aching all morning. Her ankles were swollen again. Her sandals barely fit. She could feel the familiar fatigue creeping into her bones, but rest wasn't an option. Rest didn't buy food. Rest didn't buy diapers. Rest didn't pay for delivery. Another car rushed past, throwing up dust. No one slowed down. They never did. Zara turned another corn. It hadn't always been like this. There was a time, not long ago, yet distant enough to feel like someone else's life, when she had hope. Not just survival, but actual, breathing hope. She had been working as a tailor's apprentice in Bodija, earning little but learning much. She had dreams of owning her own sewing shop one day. Something small. Maybe with a sign painted in blue and yellow that said Zara's Touch. She had met Femi at church. He had smiled the way boys do when they want to be believed. Kind, soft-eyed, a little reckless. He wore clean clothes, spoke gently, and offered to walk her home every Sunday. Her aunt warned her, men that talk too sweet always have bitterness hiding somewhere. Zara didn't listen. When she got pregnant, Femi changed. He stopped returning calls. Then one day, he simply disappeared. His number stopped going through. His friends claimed they hadn't seen him in weeks. Her aunt called her a disgrace and threw her out before the bump even showed. That was 7 months ago. Zara's stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since the night before, just a few leftover plantain chips and a sachet of pure water. The thought of food made her nauseous, but her body begged for it. She watched the road. A few Okadas zoomed past. A Kiki slowed briefly, then sped off. No one stopped for corn anymore. She leaned back and let her eyes drift toward the sky, blinking against the sunlight. There were no clouds, just heat and endless blue. Her skin itched from the sweat on her neck. Her scarf was soaked through. She began to pray, not the loud kind. The quiet, trembling kind. The kind that only God and the wind can hear. Please, just enough to eat tonight. Enough to get me through. It wasn't a big prayer. She didn't ask for miracles. Just 1 or 2 customers. Maybe someone generous. Maybe someone who didn't need change for a 500 Nigerian nairas note. The afternoon dragged on. A schoolgirl bought 1 corn. A conductor tried to haggle, then walked away without buying anything. A woman with a crying baby on her back offered Zara 50 Nigerian nairas, and she took it without a word. She was too tired to argue. The smoke from the grill curled into her eyes. They stung, but she didn't move. She was used to this. The smoke, the noise, the ache in her legs. What she wasn't used to, what still hurt, was being invisible. Nobody looked at her anymore. Not really. To them, she was just another roadside girl. Another poor, pregnant woman who had made bad choices. Just another forgotten story. She coughed and rubbed her eyes. Her vision blurred for a moment, but she blinked it away. She always blinked it away. Then, just as the sun began its slow descent, painting the road in long shadows, a car pulled over. Not a Danfo. Not an Okada. A black SUV. Shiny. Clean. The kind of car you only saw in magazines or through tinted windows. It stopped right in front of her. Zara stiffened. She instinctively pulled her scarf tighter around her shoulders and sat up straight. Her hands brushed over her belly protectively. Rich people didn't stop here. And when they did, it wasn't usually for corn. The engine shut off. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened. He stepped out. Tall. Neatly dressed. White shirt, sleeves rolled. Dark trousers. No jewelry, no flash, but there was something about the way he walked, the calm of it, that said money. Zara's throat tightened. She had learned to be careful. Some men came to help, but most just came to take. He walked toward her, slowly, no hurry. His face was unreadable behind dark sunglasses. When he reached the stall, he paused. Zara stood up, barely. Her knees shook. She didn't know whether to greet him or run. "Good afternoon," he said. His voice was low. Deep. Not cold. "Good afternoon, sir," she replied quietly. "How much is one corn?" he asked, nodding to the grill. 100 Nigerian nairas, she said, eyes flicking to his shoes, then back to his face. "They're fresh." He nodded. Then he reached into his wallet and pulled out something that didn't belong in this part of town. A 50,000 Nigerian nairas bundle, clean, crisp, bound with a rubber band. He set it on the table. Zara. Breath caught. "Sir, I don't have change," she stammered. He smiled, not wide, not arrogant. Just a tired, quiet smile. "I don't need change." Her heart pounded. She stared at the money, then at him. "I don't understand." He removed his sunglasses. And for the first time, she saw his eyes. Brown. Focused. Calm. "You don't have to," he said. "But I'd like to buy some corn." Before the roadside, before the grill, there was Femi. Zara had never imagined her life would look like this, sitting on a wooden stool under the punishing sun, hands blackened by charcoal smoke, belly full with a baby she would bring into the world alone. But that life, the one she was living now, wasn't born in a day. It was shaped by 1,000 tiny betrayals, the biggest of which came from the only person she thought she could trust. His name was Femi Adepoju. She met him at church. It was during choir rehearsal, a Thursday evening, humid and warm like most nights in Ibadan. Zara had just joined the church after moving in with her aunt in Bodija, trying to get on her feet after her mother passed. Singing helped her breathe again. It helped her forget the weight she carried in silence. Femi was a backup keyboardist, not particularly talented, but charming. He had a smile that felt like sunlight breaking through clouded windows. He offered to walk her home after rehearsal. She refused the first 2 times. But kindness wears down defenses when you've been alone long enough. By the 3rd week, they were sitting at her gate for hours, talking about life, about God, about dreams. He listened like no one ever had. They weren't lovers immediately. Zara was cautious, or at least, she thought she was. She told him about her past, her father's absence, her mother's death from illness, the aunt who had taken her in out of obligation, not love. Femi listened, nodded, held her hand like it mattered. When he kissed her, it was gentle. The kind that made you believe it was safe to close your eyes. By the time she missed her period, they were 6 months in. She took the test in the small toilet behind her aunt's house. 2 lines. Clear. Bold. She sat on the toilet seat and cried. Not because she was afraid, not yet, but because her first thought was, what will he say? She waited 3 days before telling him. They sat at the same gate. The same spot where they'd laughed and planned. She held his hand the way she always did. Femi, she said softly, I need to tell you something important. His smile faded just a little. I'm pregnant. He didn't speak right away. He looked at her, then past her, then down at their hands. You're sure? He finally asked. Yes. How? I mean, we were careful. She shook her head. Not always. He sighed. A long, tired sigh. The kind that people use when they're trying to keep something in. He rubbed his face with his palms. So what now? He said. Zara didn't understand the question. What do you mean? I'm keeping it. He turned to her sharply. Zara, we're not even married. I didn't say you had to marry me today, she replied. I'm just telling you I'm not killing my child. His face hardened. A side she hadn't seen before peeked out like a snake from behind a curtain. Zara, he said, more slowly, this isn't what I planned for my life right now. I've got my NYSC next year. I can't be tied down. Tied down? His words sank in like stones. I just need time to think, he said, already getting up. Femi, please. But he had already walked away. The next day, his number didn't go through. The day after, he wasn't at church. By the end of the week, he was gone. No one knew where he went. Or maybe they knew and were just protecting him. The choir moved on. Life moved on. And Zara, well, she couldn't afford to. She was already showing by the time her aunt found out. Disgrace, her aunt shouted, waving the test result paper in her hand like a weapon. I let you into my house, I fed you, and you repay me by bringing shame to my name? Zara stood there, silent, belly barely visible under a loose blouse. I will not let a bastard child sleep under my roof, her aunt hissed. You can leave today. Go to the father of your child. He left me, Zara whispered. Her aunt laughed bitterly. Of course he did. Men like that don't stay with girls like you. No bags. No help. Just 2,000 Nigerian nairas thrown in her direction and a slammed door behind her. Zara stood on the street that night with nothing but her phone, a plastic bag with one change of clothes, and the baby in her womb. The first night was the worst. She slept outside a closed store, using her wrapper as a blanket. The cold bit through her bones. The hunger was worse. Her pride had shattered. She had always believed she was strong, but this was beyond strength. She begged for work the next day. Most shops laughed in her face. One woman offered her bread and told her to find a way to get rid of it. Another asked how much she charged for company at night. Then, on the third day, she passed by an old woman roasting corn. Zara offered to help fan the flames. The woman let her. She stayed there for a week, fanning fire, turning corn, sweeping around the stall. Then one day, the woman didn't show up. A neighbor said she had collapsed at home. Zara never saw her again. She waited for 2 days, then slowly took over the stall. Not out of theft, out of survival. The money she made, she used to buy more corn. It grew from there. Day by day. pain by pain. Now, months later, she was still here. Turning corn. Brushing away smoke. Waiting for customers who rarely came. Sometimes she wondered if God had forgotten her. She didn't blame him. She wouldn't want to look at herself either. But there were nights she cried and whispered, "If you're still there, please don't let me die like this." She didn't want wealth. She didn't even want Femi back. She just wanted to be seen again. And then, someone did. The car. The man. The money on the table. Everything was moving too fast and too slow all at once. She felt dizzy. Confused. Was he playing with her? Pitying her? But when she looked into his eyes, she saw none of that. She saw something deeper. Something she hadn't seen in a long time. Recognition. Not of her face, but of her pain. He didn't ask questions. He didn't judge. He just stood there and gave. Not just money, but dignity. It was the first time in months Zara felt like she could breathe without pain. As he walked back to his SUV, she looked down at the bundle on the table. 50,000 Nigerian nairas. It could cover food for 2 weeks. Maybe rent for a room. Maybe antenatal care. But what scared her more than the money, was the way her heart beat when he looked back one last time, gave a small nod, and drove off. Please come back, she thought. Not because she needed more money. But because for the first time since Femi left, someone had looked at her, really looked, and hadn't walked away. The first time felt like luck. The second time felt like fate. It had been 4 days since the man in the SUV, Nathaniel, had pulled over and left a bundle of 50,000 Nigerian nairas on Zara's corn table. She hadn't touched the money for nearly an hour after he left. She just stood there, staring at it, smoke curling around her fingers as the corn continued to roast. Her mind replayed the moment over and over, his calm voice, the kindness in his eyes, the way he had looked at her without pity. He hadn't asked for anything. Not her name. Not her number. Not even an extra ear of corn. He had just given. And then, just like that, gone. That night, Zara didn't sleep on the sidewalk. She used part of the money to pay for a night in a nearby face-me-face-you house, a tiny room with a creaky mattress, no fan, and walls thin enough to hear every breath of her neighbors. But to her, it was heaven. She laid on the mattress and let herself feel the fabric against her back. She rubbed her swollen feet and whispered to the child in her belly. Someone saw us today. Maybe things are changing. She didn't want to hope too hard, because hope was a sharp thing when it broke. The next day, she returned to her stall early. The grill still smelled of yesterday's smoke. She sat for a while before lighting it. Something inside her, something long asleep, felt alert. A little voice whispered, "What if he comes back?" By noon, she had almost convinced herself he wouldn't. By 3 o'clock, she stopped checking the road. By 4 o'clock, she was bargaining with a woman over 2 ears of corn when the same black SUV pulled up. Her heart stopped. She forgot the price she had just mentioned. The woman paid and left quickly. Zara wiped her hands on her apron, trying to stop them from shaking. Smoke rose into her face, but she didn't flinch. He got out again, slowly. The same white shirt. Sunglasses. Calm posture. He didn't speak right away. Just walked up to the stall, pulled his glasses off, and smiled. "You're still here," he said. Zara blinked. "Yes, sir. I am. I was hoping you would be." He bought 1 corn. Paid with exact change this time. Then leaned lightly against the edge of the stall, the way someone does when they're trying to look casual, but are very much intentional. "I didn't introduce myself the last time," he said, unwrapping the hot corn slowly. My name is Nathaniel. She hesitated. Zara. Zara, he repeated. That's beautiful. She nodded. Her eyes were searching him. Not suspicious, but cautious. Kindness like his usually came with a cost. She just hadn't figured it out yet. Nathaniel took a bite of the corn. Chewed thoughtfully. You make this yourself? Zara smiled faintly. Yes. Every morning. It's really good. She let herself look at him then, fully. Up close, he didn't look like the men who drove big cars and barked into phones. He had the quiet presence of someone who didn't need to announce himself. His skin was a deep, rich brown. His chin was clean-shaven but strong. His braided back hair was neat, every line precise. His voice had a slight American undertone, like someone who'd lived abroad for a while but hadn't forgotten where he came from. They talked for 20 minutes. Nothing deep. She told him about the corn, where she bought it, how she learned to roast it just right. He told her he was in town for a project and liked to drive to clear his head. He didn't ask about her belly. He didn't ask where the father was. He didn't pry. And for that, Zara was grateful. When he left, he gave her a small nod again, like the first time. No money this time. Just presents. Somehow, that meant more. The next day, he came again. This time, he brought water. Cold bottled water. She hadn't had cold anything in weeks. Thought you might need this, he said, handing her the bottle. She took it. Thank you. He leaned beside the stall again. You mind if I sit? Zara hesitated, then pointed to the makeshift bench. It's not very clean. I've sat in worse places. He sat. They said nothing for a while. Zara fanned the grill quietly. Nathaniel watched the corn roast. I'm not trying to be weird, he said finally, just so you know. Zara looked up, startled. Sorry? I know this probably feels strange. Me showing up like this. But I've seen a lot of things in my life. Money. Power. People. But I've never seen anyone hold themselves together the way you do. Zara blinked quickly. Her throat tightened. I'm just roasting corn, she whispered. You're surviving, he replied. That's not the same thing. Over the next week, he came every other day. Sometimes he bought corn. Sometimes he just sat with her. He brought food once. Soft bread and hot akra. Another time, he brought slippers for her swollen feet. She tried to refuse, but he left them beside the stall and said, They're yours if you want them. She put them on 5 minutes after he left. They were soft. Like walking on clouds. She began to tell him little things. Nothing too vulnerable. Just slivers of truth. That she had been thrown out. That the baby's father had vanished. That she slept outside for weeks before someone let her borrow the stall. Nathaniel listened. Never interrupted. Never offered advice unless she asked. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the visits. It was the fact that she started to feel like she mattered again. But then, on the 8th day, he didn't come. Zara waited until the sun dipped low. Every passing car made her heart skip. He never showed up. The next day, she didn't light the grill right away. She sat, chewing her lower lip, eyes darting toward the road. Still nothing. On the 3rd day, she told herself he was gone. Just like Femi. Just like everyone. And the ache that returned was worse than hunger. Then, he came back. Late in the evening. Sun almost gone. He pulled up fast, window down, hair slightly messy. Zara. She looked up in shock. I'm so sorry, he said. I had to leave for Abuja suddenly. Something came up with work. Zara blinked hard, not trusting her voice. I didn't get a chance to tell you, I didn't want to just disappear. She nodded slowly, a strange pressure building in her chest. He got out, came to the stall, and for the first time, looked nervous. I've been thinking, he said, I want to help. I mean really help. Zara frowned slightly. You already have. No, he said gently. You deserve more than a few visits and bottled water. You need rest. A room. A doctor. Her lip trembled. I don't want pity. This isn't pity. Then what is it? He paused. And then he said it, quietly. This is someone who used to be invisible, recognizing someone who still is. Zara sat down slowly. She covered her face with her hands. And for the first time in weeks, she let herself cry. Not because she was weak. But because finally, someone stayed. The next morning, the world felt quieter. The smoke from Zara's charcoal grill rose lazily into the morning air, twisting and fading in the sunlight. The familiar rhythm of turning corn over the fire should have comforted her, but today, her hands trembled. Nathaniel's words from the night before echoed in her mind. This is someone who used to be invisible, recognizing someone who still is. She hadn't known what to say then. She still didn't. No one had ever looked at her that way, with respect, not pity, with sincerity, not hidden intentions. It was disorienting, like stepping out of darkness into light and realizing how much you'd gotten used to the shadows. By noon, she had almost convinced herself it had all been a dream. She sold 3 ears of corn, made small talk with a few passers-by, and pretended not to glance down the road every few minutes. The sun climbed higher, and the day stretched long and slow. Then a car horn blared softly. She looked up. The black SUV was back. He parked the same way, careful, deliberate, then got out holding a brown paper bag and a plastic envelope under his arm. Zara's heart jumped. He was wearing a different shirt today, navy blue, sleeves rolled to his elbows, sunglasses resting on his head instead of hiding his eyes. He looked more relaxed than usual, almost casual. Morning, he said. Good afternoon, sir, she replied, quickly wiping her hands on her apron. He smiled faintly. You can call me Nathaniel. Her lips parted as if to answer, but no sound came out. So she just nodded. He placed the brown paper bag on the edge of the stall. I brought you something. Zara froze. Sir, I don't. It's just food, he interrupted gently. Rice, beans, and a little fruit. You can check it. Her shoulders relaxed a little. She untied the bag carefully. Inside were 2 food packs, a bottle of juice, and some fresh apples. Her eyes softened. You didn't have to. I know, he said simply. But I wanted to. She stared down at the food. Gratitude welled up in her chest, so tight it almost hurt. For a moment, neither of them spoke, just the sound of the fire crackling and cars humming in the distance. After a while, he leaned against the stall again. Zara, he said quietly, I want to ask you something. She looked up, cautious again. Do you trust me? The question caught her off guard. I don't know, she admitted honestly. I don't really know you. He nodded slowly. That's fair. But I want to do something for you. Something bigger. I just don't want to scare you off. Zara frowned slightly. Scare me off how? Nathaniel glanced around, as if checking that no one was too close. Then he lifted the plastic envelope and set it on the table beside the food bag. It was thick. Too thick for papers. Open it, he said. Her heartbeat quickened. She hesitated, then slowly unzipped the top. Inside was money. Bundles of 1,000 Nigerian Naira's notes, stacked neatly, fresh, smelling faintly of new print. Her mouth fell open. "Sir, Nathaniel, what is this?" "It's yours," he said calmly. "Use it for rent. Or a better stall. Or the hospital. Whatever you need." Zara's breath caught in her throat. "I can't take this. I can't." "You can," he interrupted softly. "Because it's not charity. It's a seed." She blinked. "A seed?" He nodded. "For something better. For you." Her hands trembled as she pushed the envelope slightly toward him. "Please. I don't know what you expect in return, but I—" Nathaniel stepped back, raising his hands. "Zara. I'm not asking for anything." She stared at him, searching his face for deception, for some shadow of intention. But all she found was sincerity. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I don't need to," he replied. "Sometimes you just know when someone deserves a break." The tears came before she could stop them. She covered her mouth, shaking her head. "You don't understand, people don't do this. Not for people like me." "Maybe they should," Nathaniel said. Zara turned away, wiping her cheeks roughly. "You're going to get me in trouble." He smiled. "You already have me in trouble." That made her laugh, the first genuine laugh she'd let out in months. It startled her, how light it sounded. For a brief second, the heaviness of her life loosened its grip. Nathaniel glanced at the corn still on the grill. "How much for all of it?" Zara frowned. "All of it?" "Yeah. Every piece you've got left." "Sir, that's too much." "Then charge me extra." She laughed again, shaking her head. "You don't even like corn that much." He smiled. "No, but you do. So let's call it business." He handed her a crisp 10,000 Nigerian Naira's note and began helping her pack the roasted corn into a paper bag. It was awkward and clumsy, he burned his fingers once, and she scolded him like a child, but for a few minutes, the roadside didn't feel like hardship. It felt almost like life before it broke. Later, as the sun began to set, Nathaniel said quietly, "I'll be back tomorrow." Zara blinked. "You don't have to keep." "I want to," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Tomorrow." And then he left, just as calmly as he came. Crescent moon that night, Zara couldn't sleep. The money sat in a plastic bag beside her mattress. She kept staring at it. Touching it. Moving it closer, then farther away. She was afraid to believe it was real. Her thoughts ran wild. What if someone followed him? What if someone saw? What if this was some kind of setup? But beneath the fear was something else, a fragile warmth she couldn't name. Something that whispered maybe she wasn't cursed after all. The next day, true to his word, Nathaniel returned. But this time, he wasn't alone. A woman in scrubs stepped out of the passenger seat, holding a small medical bag. She was cheerful, kind-eyed, and professional. "Good morning," she greeted. "I'm Dr. Ifeoma. Mr. Nathaniel here asked me to check on you." Zara froze. "Check on me?" Nathaniel stepped forward gently. "You said you haven't seen a doctor in months. Let her just make sure everything's okay with you and the baby." Zara looked from him to the doctor, her chest tightening. "I don't have money for." "It's already taken care of," he said softly. Her throat went dry. "Nathaniel, why?" He looked down at her belly, then back into her eyes. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about how much you're carrying, and how much you're doing it alone." Dr. Ifeoma smiled reassuringly and guided Zara to sit down on a stool. She took her blood pressure, checked her pulse, and asked gentle questions about her health. Nathaniel waited a few feet away, giving them privacy, his eyes on the road but his mind clearly elsewhere. When the doctor was done, she nodded approvingly. "You're strong," she said. "Babies. Heartbeat sounds good. You just need rest, food, and less stress." Zara smiled weakly. "That last one is hard." The doctor chuckled. "Not impossible." Nathaniel handed the doctor a small envelope before she left. "Thank you." Zara watched the quiet exchange and felt something shift in her chest, something deeper than gratitude. When they were alone again, she whispered, "You keep doing things no one ever did for me." Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, "Maybe that's how we change what no one ever did means." The words hit her like a promise. Over the next week, things changed. Zara found a small room to rent near the stall, nothing fancy, but it had a door that locked, a roof that didn't leak, and a bed with a mattress that didn't smell of mold. Nathaniel helped her set it up quietly, avoiding any attention. He came by every evening, sometimes to bring supplies, sometimes just to talk. They began to laugh more. To share stories. She learned he'd grown up in poverty too, raised by a single mother who sold fruit until she fell ill. He had gone abroad for school, built a business, but never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. The way he said it made her eyes sting. One evening, as they watched the sun dip low over the road, Zara said softly, "Do you think I'll ever be more than this? Just selling corn?" Nathaniel looked at her, really looked, and said, "You already are." A few days later, he came with another surprise. A folded flyer. A permit. And a key. "What's this?" she asked. "Your new start," he said simply. "A small kiosk space at the community market. Paid for 6 months in advance." Zara froze, staring at him. "Nathaniel, this is too much." He smiled gently. "No. It's enough." Her hands shook as she held the key. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," he said quietly. "By surviving long enough for me to find you." That night, as she lay in her small rented room, Zara whispered to her unborn child. "We're going to be okay, my baby. Someone believed in us, and I believe now too." And for the first time in a long, long while, she fell asleep smiling. The day began with sunlight, and ended with thunder. Zara woke up with an ache in her lower back and a heaviness she couldn't explain. Her tiny rented room felt warmer than usual. The fan hadn't worked all night, and sweat clung to her neck. She sat up slowly, holding her belly. The baby kicked, hard, as if restless. "Easy, my little one," she whispered, rubbing her stomach with both hands. "We're almost there." But as she stood, the room spun. The world tilted for a heartbeat before settling again. She brushed it off. She couldn't afford to rest. The stall wouldn't open itself. By noon, the sun was merciless. The heat shimmered on the asphalt, distorting everything into waves of light. Zara sat by the stall, her body aching, her feet swollen again. She hadn't eaten breakfast. Nathaniel had been gone for 3 days. He had told her he needed to travel briefly to finalize the new kiosk arrangements, but he'd return soon. He'd even promised to bring her a fan for her room. She believed him, but the silence still hurt. The road stretched endlessly ahead, every passing car stirring a small cloud of dust and disappointment. A little boy stopped to buy corn. She smiled weakly, handed him one, and almost dropped it. Her fingers trembled. The boy frowned. "Auntie, you okay?" "Yes," she said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But her vision blurred. Her stomach clenched painfully, sharp enough to make her gasp. She steadied herself against the table, breathing through the pain. Then it happened again, worse this time. The corn tongs slipped from her hands, clattering onto the ground. Her body doubled over. Sweat broke out on her forehead. Something inside her whispered, "Not yet, please, not yet." Minutes crawled by. The contractions grew stronger, her breaths shorter. People passed by but didn't stop. To them, she was just another woman by the roadside, sweating, struggling, maybe overworked. No one looked twice. Until a voice shouted her name. Zara. She lifted her head weakly. The black SUV was pulling over fast, tires screeching slightly on the gravel. Nathaniel jumped out before it even stopped moving. He ran to her. What happened? His voice was shaking. He knelt beside her without hesitation, one hand on her shoulder, the other supporting her back. I don't know, she stammered, breathing hard. It's too soon. My stomach. Okay, he said quickly, steadying her. Don't talk. We're going to the hospital. He looked around frantically for help. Someone help me. A few bystanders approached. Together, they lifted Zara gently into his SUV. She cried out as another contraction hit. Nathaniel's jaw clenched, his eyes dark with fear. Hold on, Zara, he said, gripping the steering wheel. You're going to be fine. The hospital wasn't far, but every second felt like eternity. Zara was moaning softly, holding her belly, tears streaking her face. Nathaniel's mind raced, the traffic, the honking, the heat, everything blurred around him except her voice. Please, she whispered. Don't leave me. I'm not going anywhere, he said fiercely. He pressed harder on the accelerator. At the hospital gates, nurses rushed forward as soon as he shouted for help. Within minutes, Zara was wheeled inside. Nathaniel followed until they stopped him at the door to the maternity ward. Sir, you can't go in, a nurse said firmly. He froze, hands trembling. She's alone in there. Please. We'll take care of her, the nurse assured. You have to wait. The door closed. Nathaniel stood still in the empty hallway, staring at his reflection in the glass. Sweat dripped down his neck. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. For the first time in years, he felt helpless. Time dissolved into minutes and hours. He sat outside, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. Every sound from the ward made his heart jump. His phone buzzed with work calls, he ignored all of them. Then came the silence. The long, deafening silence. He stood up. A nurse appeared finally, her expression calm but serious. She's stable, she said softly. He exhaled so hard it was almost a sob. But we'll need to keep her for monitoring. She's exhausted and dehydrated. The baby's fine, but it was close. Nathaniel's eyes glistened. Can I see her? The nurse nodded. Briefly. Crescent moon. She was sleeping when he entered. The room smelled of antiseptic and soft linen. Zara lay pale and fragile, one hand resting protectively over her belly. Her lips were dry, her breathing shallow but steady. Nathaniel sat down quietly beside her bed. For a long time, he said nothing. Just watched her. The woman who had fought harder than anyone he knew. Then, softly, he whispered, "You scared me." Her eyelids fluttered open slightly. Nathaniel, her voice was barely there. "I'm here," he said quickly. "You're safe." A weak smile touched her lips. "I told you not to worry." He chuckled brokenly, wiping his face with his palm. "You think I can help that?" Her eyes closed again, but a tear slipped down her cheek. "Thank you, for coming back." Nathaniel took her hand carefully, pressing it between his palms. "I promised I would." 4 hours, he didn't leave. He brought food. Paid the bills. Sat beside her bed, silent but steadfast. The nurses began to whisper about the man who wouldn't move. At one point, as she slept, he whispered to himself, I can't lose her. Not her. Son. 3 days later. Zara was walking again, slowly, carefully. Nathaniel helped her outside to sit under a tree near the hospital gate. You should rest more, he said gently. I've rested enough, she replied, watching the sky. I want to see sunlight again. He smiled faintly. You've earned it. For a moment, neither spoke. Just the wind in the leaves, the distant hum of the city. Then Zara turned to him. Why do you care so much, Nathaniel? He blinked. What do you mean? I mean, why me? There are so many people in pain. So many struggling. Why me? He hesitated, then said quietly, because when I look at you, I see my mother. Zara froze. He looked away, voice low. She sold fruits by the roadside, like you. Strongest woman I ever knew. She died before I could help her. Before she could see what I became. His voice broke slightly. I couldn't save her. But maybe. I can save you. Zara's eyes filled with tears. I don't need saving. He nodded. I know. But I want to stand beside you while you rise. She looked down, then back up at him, and for the first time, she didn't see just a man. She saw someone carrying his own pain quietly, like her. Then maybe, she whispered, we'll save each other. That night, when Nathaniel drove her home, he insisted on helping her walk. Inside. The lights flickered softly. The small room looked cleaner, brighter somehow. Before leaving, he turned to her and said, Promise me something. What? Promise me you won't fight alone anymore. Zara smiled faintly. Only if you promise the same. He laughed quietly. Deal. He hesitated at the door, then looked back at her one more time, the woman who had changed him without trying. And in her tired smile, he found a reason to keep coming back. The world seemed softer that morning. The air was clear after a night of rain. The smell of wet earth drifted through the open hospital window. Sunlight, pale and golden, crept across the tiled floor of Zara's small room. For the first time in weeks, she felt quiet inside. The doctor had said she'd need to stay for observation. Her body was strong, but strained. The baby was healthy, though impatient, and could come at any time. Zara's days were now filled with soft hospital murmurs, the occasional cry of a newborn, and the distant echo of trolleys rolling down the hall. Nathaniel came every day. He never stayed too long, just long enough to bring food, check her vitals with the nurses, and make her laugh when she was too tired to smile. Sometimes he said nothing at all, just sat by the window reading or scrolling through his phone while she rested. But his presence was steady. Real. And it was that steadiness that gave her the strength she didn't know she still had. 3 days later, just before dawn, it happened. Zara woke to a deep, twisting pain low in her belly. It wasn't like the false alarms before. This one took her breath away. She gripped the sheets and whispered, Not yet, please wait for Nathaniel. But the baby didn't wait. Within minutes, the contractions came closer, harder. Nurses rushed in as she cried out softly, her hands trembling. The doctor, Dr. Ifeoma, appeared, calm but urgent. It's time, she said. The next hour blurred into light and sound and prayer. The nurses' voices guided her breathing. The smell of antiseptic mixed with her own tears. Her heart raced, part fear, part strength. When the pain peaked, she screamed. And when it broke, silence. Then, a sound she would never forget. A cry. Small. Sharp. Alive. The world stopped. They placed the baby on her chest, tiny, warm, perfect. Zara stared through tears at the small face pressed against her. A little mouth, a fragile nose, tiny fists waving in protest at the light. Her voice came out as a whisper. Grace. Dr. Ifeoma smiled. That's her name? Zara nodded, crying harder. Yes. Grace. Because that's what brought her here. Nathaniel arrived an hour later. He rushed through the doors, panic in his eyes. Where is she? Where's Zara? The nurse smiled knowingly. Room 5, sir. He burst in, and froze. Zara was sitting up in bed, tired but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in pink. Her face glowed in the soft morning light. Hey, she said weakly. Smiling. He took a step forward, then stopped, eyes wide. Is that? Grace, Zara said softly. He moved closer, every breath shaking. She's beautiful. She looks like you, Zara teased gently. He laughed, the kind of laugh that breaks something heavy open. He crouched beside her bed, staring at the baby like she was made of light. She's strong, he said. She had to be, Zara replied. She's mine. The first sunrise of Grace's life painted the world gold. Nathaniel opened the curtains, and sunlight poured into the room. Zara winced, then smiled. The baby stirred, her tiny fingers curling around her mother's thumb. Zara whispered, "You're safe now." And for the first time, she believed it. Nathaniel sat beside them, quiet, reverent. "You did it," he said softly. Zara turned to him. "No. We did." Over the next few days, the hospital room became their small universe. Nathaniel brought breakfast every morning, jollof rice one day, moi the next. He bought tiny baby clothes from a nearby market, unsure about sizes but proud of every choice. Zara laughed at his confusion as he held up little socks that could fit in his palm. "You're really bad at this," she teased. "I'm learning," he said with mock seriousness. The nurses started calling him Daddy Nathaniel, much to Zara's embarrassment and secret amusement. But even through the laughter, there was something unspoken between them. A quiet connection neither dared name. The night before discharge. The ward was silent. Zara couldn't sleep. Grace was resting in the crib beside her, breathing softly. Nathaniel was in the chair, dozing off, head tilted, arms crossed. Zara watched him for a long time. The man who had appeared from nowhere. The stranger who had stayed. She whispered, "Why me?" Nathaniel's eyes opened, maybe he'd been awake all along. "What do you mean? You've done so much. For me. For her. You don't owe us anything." He leaned forward, voice gentle. "You're right. I don't owe you. But I owe myself the chance to do something good, something that matters." Zara looked down at Grace, then back at him. "You already have." The silence between them was full of meaning. He stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. "You know, I haven't felt peace like this in years." Zara smiled faintly. "Then stay in it." He turned, eyes soft. "I plan to." The next morning, Zara was discharged. The nurse handed her a small folded paper, Grace's birth certificate. Zara held it like treasure. Her name was there. Her daughter's name too. As they stepped outside, the sky was bright and endless. Nathaniel carried the bag. Zara carried Grace. They paused at the hospital gate, the same place where, days ago, she'd sat under that tree, unsure if she'd survive another sunrise. Now, her arms were full of life. Nathaniel turned to her. "Where to?" Zara smiled through tears. "Home." For the first time. That evening, in her small rented room, she placed Grace on the mattress, wrapped in the soft cloth Nathaniel had bought. The baby opened her eyes, dark, curious, calm. Zara sat beside her, whispering, "You're everything I prayed for." A tear slid down her cheek, but it wasn't sadness. It was joy. And outside, as Nathaniel stood in the doorway watching them, sunlight faded into the most peaceful dusk he had ever seen. The days that followed were slow, in the best possible way. Zara's small rented room, once bare and lonely, now felt alive. There were the soft sounds of Grace breathing in her sleep. The faint rustle of tiny hands stretching. The quiet hum of morning light spilling through the curtains. Every corner of the room carried life now, warmth, hope, and a purpose that filled every silence. Nathaniel came every morning without fail. Sometimes he brought breakfast, warm bread and pap with milk. Sometimes he brought diapers, soap, or a new blanket for Grace. Sometimes he just came to check that they were okay, sitting on the edge of the bed and making the baby laugh with silly faces. And every day, Zara's heart opened a little more. Healing wasn't loud, it was quiet and slow. The first week, she could barely walk without pain. Nathaniel was patient, never hovering too close, but always near enough to help if she stumbled. He fixed the curtain rod that had been broken for months. He repaired the wobbly stool beside her bed. He bought a small standing fan that hummed gently through the night, keeping both Zara and Grace cool as they slept. He didn't ask for thanks. But Zara always whispered it anyway, even when he wasn't listening. One morning, Zara found him standing by the window, staring out at the sunrise. His face looked peaceful, but his eyes were far away. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He turned, smiled faintly. "Yeah. Just thinking." "About what?" "About how strange life is," he said. "How it can take everything from you, and still give you something beautiful back." Zara followed his gaze, the sun, the rooftops, the open sky. Grace was sleeping between them, her tiny hand resting on Zara's arm. Zara whispered, "Maybe we're both getting a second chance." He nodded. "Maybe that's what this is." Weeks passed. Zara began to heal. Her strength returned slowly. Her laughter came easier. She learned to carry Grace on her back the way her mother used to do with her. She roasted corn again, this time outside her small room instead of the roadside stall. Nathaniel helped build a makeshift stand for her, sturdy wood, fresh paint, a clean sign that read, "Zara's Grill." When she saw it finished, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve all this," she said. Nathaniel shook his head. "You've worked for it every day of your life." He handed her a small mirror, half joking. "Now you can see what strength looks like." She laughed, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "You. And your words. You love them," he teased. "Maybe," she admitted. Hibiscus the town began to notice her. People who once passed her without a glance now stopped to buy her roasted corn. Her stall smelled of butter and warmth. Grace slept nearby in a small bassinet Nathaniel had bought from a market. Women from the neighborhood came by to talk, to ask about her story. Zara didn't hide it anymore, she told them the truth, how she fell, how she was abandoned, and how she got back up again. Some cried. Some hugged her. Some even asked if they could help at the stall. For the first time, Zara wasn't alone. Crescent moon one evening, as the sun dipped low, she found Nathaniel cleaning the grill. "You don't have to do that," she said. He smiled without looking up. "I like doing it." "You shouldn't," she said, leaning against the door. "You're a billionaire, remember?" He laughed. "I'm not that kind of billionaire." "What kind are you then?" He looked up at her. The light caught his face, tired, kind, honest. The kind who remembers what hunger feels like. Zara's heart ached quietly at that. She walked closer, sitting beside him. "Do you ever miss it? Before all the money?" Nathaniel paused. Sometimes. Life was hard, but simple. I knew who I was back then. And now? She asked softly. He looked at her, and for a long moment, didn't answer. Then he said, now. I'm still figuring it out. Zara smiled. Then maybe we're both still learning. He nodded. Together. Milky Way that night, Grace wouldn't sleep. Zara paced the room, humming quietly, but the baby kept fussing. Nathaniel stayed, rocking her gently when Zara grew too tired. When Grace finally fell asleep, Zara sat beside him on the floor, their shoulders almost touching. Thank you, she whispered. For what? He asked. For not leaving when it got hard. He looked at her, long and steady. You didn't either. Their eyes met. For a moment, the world slowed. It wasn't romance yet. Not quite. But it was something deeper, a connection born from shared wounds and quiet loyalty. Son, the next morning, Nathaniel surprised her again. A small paper bag sat on her table, wrapped neatly. Inside was a handwritten note and a set of business cards that read, Zara's Grill, authentic corn and smoked snacks. Owner, Zara Daniels. Contact, +234-. Her hands shook as she held them. The note read, You're not just surviving anymore. You're building something. N. Zara smiled so wide her cheeks hurt. She lifted Grace in her arms and whispered, We're really doing it, baby. We're finally doing it. Sunrise healing didn't happen all at once. It came in small moments, laughter over burnt corn, soft music in the mornings, Grace's tiny fingers wrapping around Nathaniel's thumb. And though neither said it out loud, they both knew something was growing between them, something fragile but real. It wasn't love built on need. It was love born from healing. The morning smelled of roasted corn and laughter. Zara's Grill had become more than just a roadside stall. It was a gathering place, a corner of hope on a dusty street where stories, smiles, and small dreams met. The sign Nathaniel painted stood proudly above the stall, its yellow letters glowing under the morning sun. Zara worked with practiced ease, turning the corn, brushing it with butter, and greeting customers who now came not just for food, but for her kindness. Grace lay nearby in her small basket, cooing softly. And whenever Zara turned, her baby's tiny eyes followed her, curious, alive, safe. Nathaniel was there too, most days. Sometimes he sat under the umbrella, answering business calls quietly while keeping one eye on Grace. Other times he helped carry sacks of corn or fix a stubborn hinge on the grill. The people of the neighborhood had begun to notice him, the tall, calm man with neat braids who treated the corn seller like she was royalty. At first, they whispered. Now, they simply smiled. Zara had grown in ways she hadn't realized. She was no longer the frightened girl abandoned by the roadside. She had learned to trust again, slowly, carefully, like testing the ground after a long storm. Her business was thriving. She'd hired 2 young girls from the area, Amaka and Titi, to help her roast and sell corn. Both were from broken homes. Both needed someone to believe in them. Zara saw herself in their faces. And she became for them what Nathaniel had been for her. A chance. One evening, she sat on a low stool, counting the day's earnings. Grace slept soundly in her lap. The air smelled of smoke and fresh rain. Nathaniel sat across from her, legs stretched, watching her with quiet amusement. You're good at this, he said. At what? Running a business. You've got more customers than I do employees. She laughed, shaking her head. You're exaggerating. No, he said, smiling. You've built something special. She stopped counting and looked at him. We built it. He tilted his head slightly. You really think so? I know so, she said softly. You believed in me when I didn't. You gave me more than money. You gave me belonging. Nathaniel didn't speak for a moment. His eyes softened. Zara, he said finally, you don't know how much you've given me, too. Later that night, as the world slept, Nathaniel stayed behind to clean the stall. Zara watched from her doorway, holding Grace. The glow from the small lantern caught his face, focused, humble, kind. He wasn't a man who wanted to be praised. He just did what was right and walked away quietly. Something in her heart stirred. Thank you, she whispered to the dark, even though he couldn't hear her. Weeks passed. Zara's grill became a symbol of hope. A journalist from a local paper came by, curious about the woman whose small stall had turned into a growing business that employed young women and offered free evening meals for street kids twice a week. When the article was published, Zara's name spread across town. People came from far and wide to taste her corn, take photos, and meet the woman who refused to give up. But Zara didn't care about fame. She cared about Grace. About the young girls she mentored. About the people who smiled because of her food. And, though she wouldn't admit it out loud, she cared about Nathaniel. One quiet morning, Nathaniel arrived unusually late. Zara had just finished setting up the stall. The crowd was starting to form. She looked up as his SUV parked nearby. He stepped out, looking tired but smiling. You okay? She asked. He nodded. Yeah. Just a long night. Work? He hesitated. Sort of. There was something different in his tone. Softer. He looked at Grace, who reached out a tiny hand toward him. He smiled, lifted her, and said quietly, she's growing fast. Too fast, Zara said, smiling. Sometimes I wish I could pause it all. He looked at her, long and thoughtful. Some moments shouldn't be paused. They should be lived. Their eyes met, the world slowing for just a heartbeat. That evening, as they closed the stall, Nathaniel spoke. Zara, he said, there's something I want to tell you. She frowned. What is it? He took a deep breath. I'm leaving town for a few days. There's an investment project I need to handle in Lagos. But I'll be back soon. Zara's heart sank before she could stop it. She smiled faintly. Of course. Work calls. He chuckled softly. Don't worry. You can't get rid of me that easily. She laughed too, but her chest felt tight. That night, Grace cried again. Zara sat rocking her in the dim light, her mind spinning with unspoken things. She wanted to tell Nathaniel how much his presence meant, how much lighter life felt when he was near. But some feelings are too fragile to name. She whispered to Grace, he'll come back. And Grace, in her small, sleepy way, smiled. Days turned to weeks. Nathaniel didn't return right away. He called, he sent messages, but something in his voice had changed. Tired. Distant. Almost broken. Zara tried not to worry, but she did. Until one afternoon, a black SUV pulled up again. She rushed out instinctively, but when the door opened, it wasn't Nathaniel. A man in a suit stepped out instead, holding an envelope. He handed it to her with a small bow. From Mr. Nathaniel. Then he left. Inside the envelope was a letter and a folded document. The letter read. Zara. If you're reading this, I've gone somewhere to rest for a while. The project I went for didn't go as planned, and I need time to think. Don't worry about me. You've taught me what resilience looks like. And I want to give you something that proves I believe in you completely. Inside this envelope is the lease for your new shop at the Market Square. It's yours. Officially. I'll see you soon. N. Zara. Read the words twice. 3 times. Her hands trembled. He had left, but not really. He had given her a piece of permanence. A place to belong. Weeks later, Zara's Grill and Cafe opened at the market square. The sign was bigger, brighter, more beautiful. There was space for tables, shade, music. Children played nearby. The smell of roasted corn filled the air. Zara stood at the entrance, holding Grace. She looked up at the sign, then at the sky. "Thank you," she whispered. Because she knew he'd find his way back, when he was ready. And for the first time in her life, Zara didn't just feel alive. She felt rooted. At peace. Home. The first rain came the day he returned. Zara was at the cafe, rearranging baskets of roasted corn when the clouds broke open. The rain fell heavy and sudden, turning the dust of the market square into wet, glistening earth. She laughed softly as she covered the grill, her apron soaked. Grace was inside, napping in a cradle by the counter. The other vendors rushed to pack their goods, but Zara stayed. Her stall had an awning now, sturdy and wide, the kind Nathaniel once promised to build. Thunder rolled in the distance. She turned to fetch a cloth, and froze. Through the mist and rain, a tall figure stood by the market gate. Nathaniel. He looked different, thinner, his eyes heavier, his smile faint. But even through the rain, the way he carried himself hadn't changed. Zara stood still, her heart pounding. He walked closer slowly, water streaming down his braids, his white shirt plastered to his skin. When he stopped a few feet away, they just stared at each other. For a long, breathless moment, the world shrank to the sound of rain between them. "Sun behind rain cloud, you came back," she said finally. Nathaniel's lips curved slightly. "I told you I would." She exhaled shakily. "It's been months." "I know." He looked down, ashamed. "I needed time." "Time for what?" "To remember who I was before everything got loud," he said softly. "To be the man who walked up to a corn stall and saw strength instead of struggle." Zara swallowed the lump in her throat. "You could have just said that." "I didn't know how," he admitted. The honesty in his voice cut deeper than distance ever could. A small cry interrupted the silence. Grace, waking from her nap. Zara turned instinctively, but Nathaniel's voice stopped her. "Can I see her?" Zara hesitated, then nodded. He stepped under the awning, his hands trembling slightly as he reached into the cradle. Grace blinked up at him, wide-eyed and curious. "She's bigger," he whispered. "She's everything," Zara said quietly. Nathaniel smiled, his eyes shining. "She looks like you." Zara laughed softly. "Everyone says that." "They're right." For a while, they said nothing. Just the sound of rain, the smell of corn, and the quiet heartbeat of a moment long overdue. Later, when the rain stopped, they sat together at the stall. Zara handed him a roasted corn. Nathaniel took it with a smile, just like the first day they met. "This feels familiar," he said. "Only difference is," she replied, "you're not the one saving me this time." He looked at her, amused. "You think I ever did?" "I know you did." He shook his head. "You saved yourself. I just watched you do it." Zara stared at him, the man who'd once been a stranger, who'd become her friend, her helper, her anchor. "I used to think you were a miracle," she said quietly. "Now I think you were a message." He frowned slightly. "A message?" She nodded. "That no one is too lost to be found again." Nathaniel's throat tightened. "Zara." But she smiled, cutting him off. "You don't have to say anything. Just don't disappear again." He reached across the table, his hand brushing hers, steady, warm, real. "I won't." Weeks passed, and the world felt right again. Nathaniel helped expand the cafe. They added benches, a coffee corner, and a small chalkboard menu. Grace grew fast, full of laughter and light, always reaching for Nathaniel's braids when he held her. They weren't a couple yet, not officially. But the way they looked at each other told a story no label could contain. One evening, as the sun set, Nathaniel stood outside the cafe. He watched Zara sweep the floor, humming softly. Her hair was tied back, her movements graceful, strong. He stepped closer. "You look happy." She smiled. "I am." "Because of me?" he teased. "Because of us," she said simply. He laughed, a deep sound full of peace. "Fair enough." They stood together, watching the last light fade, the air smelling of roasted corn and rain. Nathaniel turned to her and said quietly, "You know, when I first saw you, I thought I was helping you survive. But now, I realize you taught me how to live." Zara blinked, her eyes glistening. "And you taught me that love doesn't have to hurt." He smiled. "So what do we call this?" She took his hand. "Home." Milky Way that night, the cafe lights glowed long after closing. Grace slept inside. Zara and Nathaniel sat outside, side by side, watching the stars. No more pain. No more running. Just peace, the kind that comes when two broken people finally find the place where they both belong. The days no longer blurred together, they bloomed. Morning light spilled through the windows of Zara's grill and cafe, painting the walls gold. The smell of roasted corn and coffee mingled in the air. Children laughed outside. The sound of the market's life hummed like music. And in the middle of it all, Zara stood with Grace in her arms, smiling, whole, and home. Her stall had become a cafe. Her story had become a legacy. It had been a year since the rain. Nathaniel never left again. He still traveled for work, still carried the weight of his world, but now, he always came home to them. Some evenings, he helped at the cafe, sleeves rolled up, braids tied back, serving customers like any other worker. People who once whispered about the billionaire now saw him laughing with the corn seller, his hands dusted with charcoal, his heart light. And they understood. Some love stories don't need grand gestures. They just need staying power. Grace had become the heartbeat of the cafe. She was walking now, tiny steps, big curiosity. She greeted every customer with a smile and a sticky piece of roasted corn. Everyone adored her. Zara would often stop mid-sale just to watch her, the way she giggled, the way Nathaniel scooped her up and spun her around, their laughter blending with the sounds of the street. Sometimes, when Grace napped, Zara sat outside the cafe alone, just breathing in the air. She'd close her eyes and remember the girl she used to be, barefoot, scared, hungry, invisible. And she would whisper, "You made it." One evening, the cafe hosted something new, a night of gratitude. Zara had planned it quietly. She invited the neighborhood women who had once helped her, the girls she employed, even the doctor who had delivered Grace. There were candles on the tables. Music floated softly through the air. And the smell of grilled corn, smoky, sweet, familiar, tied everyone together. Nathaniel stood beside her, watching her with pride. "You did this," he said. She shook her head. "We did this." "No," he said gently, "you turned pain into purpose. That was all you." Zara's eyes filled with quiet tears. "I only did it because someone believed I could." Nathaniel reached out and brushed his thumb across her cheek. "And I only believed because I saw you." When the guests had gone and the candles burned low, they sat outside together. Grace was asleep on Zara's lap, her tiny hand gripping a corner of Nathaniel's sleeve. The night was quiet except for the hum of crickets and the faint crackle of dying coals from the grill. Zara whispered, "Do you ever think about how we got here?" Nathaniel nodded. "Every day. Sometimes I can't believe it's real," she said softly. That we went from smoke and struggle to this. He smiled. The fire didn't destroy us. It refined us. She looked at him, her eyes shining in the lamplight. Do you think it'll last? Nathaniel leaned closer. It already has. The stars burned bright above them. Zara leaned her head on his shoulder. For the first time in her life, she didn't need to wonder about tomorrow. She had peace. She had purpose. She had love, quiet, honest, unshakable. Nathaniel looked down at her and whispered. You were never just a story I stumbled into, Zara. You were the reason I came home. Zara smiled, eyes half closed. And you were the reason I believed home could exist again. They sat that way for a long while, no words, no noise, just two hearts beating in rhythm beside a sleeping child. The cafe lights glowed behind them, warm and eternal. A symbol of everything they had built from ashes. At dawn, Zara woke to the first light touching the cafe sign. Zara's grill and cafe gleamed against the morning sky, droplets of dew catching the sunlight. She walked outside, barefoot, Grace still asleep on her hip. Nathaniel followed, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. They stood together, watching the sunrise. Forever, he said quietly. Zara smiled. After the fire. And with that, the world seemed to exhale. Whole, healed, and full of grace. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more. Thank you.